Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, where wealth strategies and pop culture collide, featuring your distinguished host and certified financial planner, Bart Zandbergen.
Welcome to our show of Dream Chasers and Wealth Makers. We are thrilled to be back in the studio today with a new episode of the Zandbergen Report. I'm proud to bring in the movers, shakers, and difference makers who are passionate about sharing what they have learned and what you need to know today. And welcome everyone to the Zandbergen Report. And I'm happy to be in studio this week with some very special guests. I have Carmel and Camelia Imani from the Imani Law Group. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. If you notice that they have the same name, it's because they're sisters. And I find it very interesting that you guys are a year apart, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Went to the same law school. Did you graduate the same year?
Yeah, we were in the same class.
Just to confuse people, they were like,
Yeah.
we would often, one of us would get left out of emails because they thought it was just a duplicate email. They're
Yeah,
like, oh, there
right.
can't be two people with almost the same names, but
Yeah.
Yeah, names. Well, your parents had a sense of humor, I
Yeah.
guess, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. All right. So it looks like you started your career doing more litigation, and then you moved over to transactional. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. So you're helping business owners, entrepreneurs with their transactional stuff, with protecting their brand, protecting their business, et cetera. Does that sound?
Yeah.
I got you
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay, excellent. What I really think is interesting too that you consider yourself different because you offer flat rate fees, transparency, approachability, and here's my favorite: provide a virtual space for community connectivity on social platforms, including Instagram and TikTok. That is different for a law firm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun for us too because so much of what you think of lawyers doing is it's very strict, it's rigid, it's very serious, and we thought,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. So
Yeah.
we're kind of making it our own, and we're having a great time with it.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And I've seen your stuff, and I think you're doing a really good job at
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah,
you.
of course. Well, in prep for the show, we decided, hey, what's going to be best for my listeners and for my clients? And we decided you guys were going to talk about 5 points in investing in your business.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's start there. I'll let you start with point number 1, and we'll work our way through.
Yeah. So, a lot of times when clients set up calls with us, one of the first question is, well, what's my first step when starting a business? And so one of the first things that you want to invest in is figuring out which type of business structure you need. Because, every state is different. In California, there's professional corporations and not everyone can be an LLC. So, it's really important to talk to an attorney to see what's the right business structure for you and how to get set up.
Right. And you guys, can you practice business outside of California?
When it comes to state transactional stuff, it's California, but a lot of things we do are federal. For example, copyrights and trademarks are federal, so we practice that on a federal level.
Okay. You want to talk real briefly about the differences between, let's say, like someone's considered an S corp versus an LLC?
Yeah, this is actually one of our number one questions. When people come to us, they say, well, my accountant said I should be an S Corp. Should I be an LLC or should I be an S Corp? And we always have to tell people that an S Corp is actually not a business entity type. It's actually just a tax election. So the way that it works is you first set up your business entity. And for that, your options are typically a corporation or an LLC. Of course, you're a professional, you'd be a professional corporation. And then from there, you can elect to either have a default tax election or you can choose to be taxed as something called an S Corp. So an S Corp is not a business entity type that you would choose. It just makes sense if you're making a certain amount of money, then that would make sense for your business to save money on taxes. Yeah.
What's usually the barrier on that?
Yeah, we've been told the threshold is around $60,000. If you're netting that, then an S Corp will help you. If you're making under that, then you're not really saving on taxes, and then you're spending all this money setting up payroll, and it becomes more of a cost and a nuisance to the client.
Right. Okay, so that's the barrier to entry. But on the upper side, is there any difference or any limit on one that would lead you to one direction or another?
Yeah, if you're making above that, then S Corp would definitely be the tax selection that you would want to make.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Liability protection on an LLC versus another entity?
It's all the same. So the good news with the LLC or corporation, whichever one you choose, you're still getting that liability protection, which is why people elect to have a business structure rather than just operating as a sole proprietorship, which is default. if you're not filing any forms. So by having an LLC or a corporation, you get that same legal liability protection.
Okay.
And that's why we recommend LLCs for small business owners. I mean, some business types do need a corporation, but why have a corporation and have those extra formalities if you get that same level of liability protection with an LLC? So if your business is able to have that, I mean, if there's no rule against it in California, because there are rules, then an LLC is definitely the way to go.
Okay. I mean, there's rules between S Corp and LLC on the number of shareholders, right?
Correct.
And if, the ability to sell out as a partner.
Yeah, if you're somebody who's going to have shareholders, if you're going to issue stock, then a corporation would make more sense for you over an LLC. Yeah.
Are there particular industries where you usually say, okay, S Corps can be under a few, and then other industries where LLC?
Yeah, well, so when it comes to having a corporation versus an LLC in California, for example, if you're a certain type of professional, you're required to be a professional corporation. So for those, you couldn't set up an LLC, and then of course, you can choose to be taxed a certain way. But it just depends on what type of business you have. I mean, if you just have a small business, you don't have investors, then doing an LLC would make sense. And if you're someone who makes a lot of money, then electing that S Corp would be beneficial.
Okay, awesome. Any other types that listeners should be aware of?
I mean, there's the business structure, and then there's the way you're taxed.
Yeah.
So, for example, a lot of people say, well, I'm a partnership. So if you have, for example, an LLC and you're a multi-member LLC, let's say it's like you and your spouse, then you can elect to be taxed as a partnership instead. So when it comes to taxes, that's like a whole nother branch. But then legally, yes, there's these business structures that you can set up for your own business that would be more beneficial for you.
Okay. Obviously, no liability protection with a partnership, right?
With a partnership, there is, so you still have the limited liability. So if you have a LLP, for example, that stands for limited liability protection, you still have that protection as well. You're still separating yourself from the business.
But what if it's just a straight partnership, no LL?
Correct.
Involved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
If you haven't filed with the state, then there isn't that liability protection. So if you're just a sole proprietor, or you're someone who with a partner decided to start a business, but you didn't file a business entity with the state, then you don't have that liability protection because you didn't file. You didn't tell the state, hey, look, I'm separate as a person from my business.
Where does the protection, where does it start and where does it begin? I mean, I compare it to, you guys, have you done any work in estate planning, like a living trust?
We've seen it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I think a lot of people under the false belief that, I have a living trust, so I'm liability protected. Well, it's not really. I mean, it is a layer, but it's definitely not complete protection.
Right.
Is it similar with an LLC, or is there really significant protection?
Well, with an LLC, you're separating yourself from the business. And you have to follow formalities to keep that LLC in good standing. You have to separate your bank accounts, all of that. With a trust, with estate planning, that comes in if there's like a death. So yes, you can protect your assets with a trust because it's not in your name; it's in the name of the trust. But it's like you said, it's just a layer of protection to not have things in your name.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go through probate.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else there before you go to your point number 2?
Yeah, let's move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your point number 2?
I mean, I know we made the points. I didn't remember the order. So tell us, what's point number 2?
All right. Your point number 2, the importance of using contracts in your business.
Oh, right. Yeah. I think a lot of times business owners, you do a handshake deal, or sometimes a lot of business owners will come to us and they'll say, well, I have this contract that I just found on Google. And we have to remind business owners that contracts are really like a holy grail for your business. If you don't have them and something goes wrong, well, now you don't have terms that you can look to say, hey, these were the terms we agreed on. And if you don't do that, it can cost you tens and thousands of dollars. I mean, if someone asks for a refund on the services, or you guys disagreed on what the terms of the service was, it's really hard to then come up with what's correct if there isn't a contract in place. So it's really important to have a well-drafted contract by an attorney who knows what to look for, as opposed to one that you kind of just put together online.
So you're talking about a contract between the business owner and the customer or client? Is that what you're referring
Yeah.
to?
Or anyone you do a business transaction with. So yes, between your clients and also as well with your employees, with your independent contractors, anyone you have an agreement with, it should be in writing so that there is that formal agreement. It's another layer of protection, like we talked about with an LLC. It's that extra layer that you have. A lot of people that don't have an LLC, they say, hey, for me, it's not worth it to pay the annual fee of having an LLC in California. We always tell them, okay, at least have contracts. Like that should be your number one thing to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And also contracts between, if you own a business with someone else, a contract between you two. So if you have an LLC with someone else, have an operating agreement. I mean, Carmel and I, we have a business together, and even though we're sisters, really good sisters, I don't think anything could happen. We still have a contract between us as to like what would happen.
Yeah.
So contracts are even important if you have the business with someone else, just internally.
And I imagine part of that contract, I mean, I'm thinking like buy, sell or something like that, right? So the contract would be like, hey, you guys are sisters, you get along great, but one of you could get hurt and one of you pass away. So what happens then, right?
Sure, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Are you seeing, a lot of people use buy, sell and those kind of agreements within partners in an organization?
Exactly. So when we set up people's LLCs or their corporations, if they have, even if they're a single member, we still send an operating agreement. But sometimes if they have more than one member, if they're a partnership, or if they have other members in their LLC, we always send them some sort of operating agreement as well. Because
you never know, even if it's just you could add someone to the business to operate it with you. So just in case to have that.
Yeah. All right. What happens to the person that doesn't have anything? And something happens.
The state law will apply.
Yeah. So there's always a contract. It's just, do you want your terms or do you want the state's terms?
Do you want the state of California or do you want your own?
Same with estate planning, right? You could come up with your own terms or you could just go through probate and pick. So I think a lot of times what people don't know, and I mean, why would you know, right? It's not something you learn, but there's always rules in place, but it's all preventative. I mean, if you have general terms that you want, you can make them. You just have to make them in advance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there, in any contract, I'm sure there's standard things and then there's outside of the box things, right?
Right.
All right. Are there any like crazy out of the box things that you've seen?
Not that we've seen. I mean, our clients are nobody's been crazy. So we haven't seen anything crazy, but I'm sure people do it. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, if it's like a sales contract or something. So, because you're saying contractor everything, right?
Yeah.
And so if these people find themselves in a court, so it's one against the other. So it's not against the state in that manner, right? It's one person against the other.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And is there, I guess there's just less direction with that, right? It's just one person's word against another. And
that would be a breach of contract case there. If someone were to breach, you mean like the terms of the contract?
Either that or there was no contract.
There was no contract.
Yeah, we agree to do this.
That makes it really hard.
Yeah.
Because then you have to do a he said, she said. You have to, you get emails up, you get documents, and then you have to plead a case versus, okay, here's the contract. This is what we agreed on. So, you either breached it or you didn't. It makes it a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can actually avoid litigation if you have a contract because, the terms are clear.
Yeah.
You both agreed on it.
Plus, you can put in the contract mediation, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or arbitration.
Yeah.
Or arbitration.
Yeah.
Not mediation, arbitration. Or both, right?
Or,
or?
You can do either. Yeah. So it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. It's your terms,
Do what you want.
You choose.
Or we say we flip a coin. That's in the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else in the contracts that we should know about?
It just really depends on what service industry you are in or what goods. So it just really depends. But in general, you want to make sure that you have whatever the terms are of what you're providing, whether it's a good or your service, and then refund policies, right? You want to know what happens if someone is not happy with the service or the goods. Those are like the main things. But of course, it just depends.
Like what's the exchange? Like you're paying how much and what are you paying for?
Yeah.
Those are the most important things.
Okay.
Those two things.
All right. Great. All right. So this next one is interesting to me. I'll tell you why after you start answering it, because it's now applied to my business and some of the things that I do. So the importance of intellectual property and how to prove ownership of it through trademarks and copyright. So I'll just share with you what I've come across recently. So I have a compliance department, right? That's very regulative in the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. And we're just notified that anything that we publish online, we for trademark purposes, we have to get consent. Like both of you will sign a consent before you go that just says, I'm allowed to use your picture and likeness in promoting this podcast. It just came out of the blue. It's like a 30-day old compliance rule. But, I mean, that's trademark, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that sound unusual?
Yeah. So, I mean, are you using certain, I guess, in what capacity are you using the materials?
It's like on social media just to promote. Like for this show, I'll say, look, these were
Okay.
my guests. You know, might have our pictures together. In order for me to get that approved through my compliance department to get on social media platform, I need your signed consent.
Right. Okay. For likeness and
Yeah.
for advertisement. Yeah. So when it comes, if you're like promoting something or selling something, and it's not your intellectual property, then yes, you would have to get that consent. So that would make sense. With trademarks, a lot of the times our clients are coming to us because either they're coming in a preventative way of, hey, I came up with this business idea. This is the name. I don't want anyone else to copy it. Let's trademark it before it gets out there in the public so that we can, so I can own this name.
Yeah.
And then we have people who are like, hey, someone stole where it's like too late now, you know, or like, what can we do? So we try to help people in the preventative, we're more in the preventative stage and trying to educate people on the importance of protecting your intellectual property, whether you came up with a really cool idea, whether that's, you know, a book you wrote, or whether it's like a brand name identifier, a slogan or logo, anything that identifies your brand, you need to protect it.
Whoa, really? So
If you don't want someone to steal it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So even a book, you write a book, you have to trademark that?
No. When it comes to a book, that's copyright. And with copyright, once you, or even a photo, anything that's like a tangible medium that is in the copyright world, and you automatically have copyright. It's automatically given to you once you create it.
Yeah.
With trademarks, it's different. Trademarks are different than copyright in that trademarks, it's a brand name. So it's a brand identifier like Nike or the Just Do It, that's their slogan, or the Swish sign. That's all identifying the brand. So that would fall under trademarks.
But not the name of the company.
The name of the company is also a trademark because it identifies their brand.
With books, it's just with trademarks, there's nuances and there's rules. So, for example, when you asked about book, you're not allowed to trademark the name of the book. If it's a series, for example, Harry Potter, you can't trademark Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, for example. But the Harry Potter series, that's trademarked. So, because that's now identifying your brand. Now that's part of your brand. So there's just rules around it. But if it identifies your brand, it can be trademarked.
So our company, Zandbergen Group, I don't need to trademark that, or do I?
When it comes, this is more of the way we always ask whenever we get asked that, we always ask like, would it make you upset if somebody else had the same name and was doing something related to what you were doing?
Yeah.
And they trademarked it.
So then you need a trademark.
If your answer is yes, then I would recommend getting a trademark.
Because here's what would happen. Let's say you don't trademark it.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes next month and they file a trademark for Zandbergen Group. A year and a half goes by. They go through the trademark process. They get registered.
Yeah.
They could send you a cease and desist letter telling you, hey, you're infringing on our rights.
What?
We own it. And of course, then there are things you can do. You can go to court. You can go through all this. But you don't have to, right? You can prevent all of that by just getting the trademark.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to talk to Nicole about that. I'm going to pick up that name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So-
taglines I could see make a little more sense. I get it now.
Yeah.
But like our taglines, Discover True Wealth, that kind of makes sense to me because I wouldn't
Yes.
want somebody to use that either.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's how it just depends on
Dang.
what do you want to own and what would you be okay with if somebody basically took from you.
That's
you
a
know?
great lead-in. Would you be okay or would you be upset?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, because some people they're not really married to their name, or they're okay with rebranding, but other people, it also depends on whether it's like a good or service. Some people are more, if you have like a company, you're selling a certain product, you know, that you definitely don't want someone to steal, you know, the idea of it and the name and, you know, run with it.
Okay. Because I mean, at first blush, when I think of trademark, I usually think of product
Yeah.
or idea,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Not so much like a name, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
in connection with any goods or services you have. So, for example, with us, we don't provide goods, but we provide a service. So we trademark the name of our law firm because we didn't want somebody else to come along with Imani Law and then tell us you can't have this, you know.
Yeah.
So
They sometimes call it a service mark instead of a trademark because
Yeah.
a lot of people also think of it like that. They
Yeah.
think like trademark has to do with goods, service
Yeah.
mark for services.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why you'll see the SM at the end of the mark.
yeah, but everybody just has the R. So.
Yeah, R is
Yeah.
for when it's registered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
How is it a long, tedious process? Is it an expensive process to go through a SM or a TM?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yes to both.
it's long. It's
a
long.
long
If you have an attorney, it shouldn't be tedious because it should be hands off. But it's definitely a long process. I mean, and not because of the attorneys, right? So when we file an application, there's certain stages the trademark has to go through, and every single trademark application goes through them. And to go from start to end is at least 12 to 16 months because the trademark office is so backed up. Everybody's filing trademarks.
Yeah.
So it's a process you get through. You know, they have to the trademark examiners on the other side, they have to look at your mark, make sure that there is no mark that's confusingly similar as yours already in the trademark database for similar goods and services. If you pass through that, then they have to make sure everything in your application, everything else was done correctly. If not, they might send correspondences that you have to respond to. You have to do it by a certain timeline. And then, there's, it gets published for opposition. There's just a bunch of different stages that it goes through. So
Yeah.
It's more like a proceeding. It's not like an LLC process where you just file everything
yeah.
and then the next week you have all your paperwork. It's
Yeah.
more, it's like a year-long process. And if you have an attorney, or for example, for us, it's all hands off for the client. So we take care of everything from beginning to end
Yeah.
until they get their registration.
it doesn't have to be tedious,
But it is going to be expensive.
yeah, it's a process. It's a process.
But we always say, maybe it sounds expensive to do it, but it's a lot more expensive to
I know
later
where
on
you're
have to
going.
fight
Yeah,
it.
fight
So,
because get your name back.
it's part of it. How do you
Yeah.
want to look at it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you? I don't want to put you on the spot, so you can just say yes or no. Is it a standard price for logos versus company name versus an invention? Is it each a different price, or how does that work?
Yeah,
So
that's a good question.
that's a great question. It's the same. It's for every application. It's a flat fee for each application.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's a logo or a slogan or a word mark. It all is.
All the same?
It's
Yeah.
all the same process. It all
Yeah.
goes through the same process.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And the other side, is it a government agency? It is, right?
Yeah.
It's the USPTO.
Okay.
So United States.
Does it work like the post office or the IRS?
It's so slow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
It takes a long
it's because
time.
they're so backed up, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's filing trademarks, so
Yeah.
I'm sure they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, they're doing the best they can, but it takes a while. We always say just be patient.
Yeah.
It takes a while for your file to get assigned
Yeah.
to an attorney at the USPTO. So there's an attorney that gets assigned to their file on the other end, and so that's when all the magic happens between us as their attorney of record and them,
Yeah.
and we correspond back and forth. And there's a lot more that goes into it, but
Well, thanks to you all. It's going to be really busy now because people are going to listen to this show. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have to deal with that.
yeah.
We're going to call you and trademark. Okay. Anything else there that we should know about?
That's like the gist of it. Yeah.
What if two trademarks are going in, one's 1 month ahead of the other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The USPTO is what it comes down to in real life, because there's like the law, but then what ends up happening is if you have somebody who's filed 1 month before you, then they have first in line. So it's really like a race to the USPTO office. Let's say tomorrow somebody files for Zandbergen and then you come in the next day, well, they have priority.
Yeah, because the attorneys are looking at the dates that it's filed, so it's really time stamped on the day you file. So it is important when you file it. You want to get the application in. Yeah.
By the way, just so you know, I did find a Zandbergen group in Holland, where my parents are from. My family.
okay.
I saw one there. It's a trucking company.
Okay. Well, that's
It's
different.
unrelated.
It's unrelated.
I felt pretty
yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
the we always give the example of Dove. There's Dove chocolates and Dove soap. So the same name can coexist as long as they're not in a related category of goods and services.
Could Dove soap say to Dove chocolate, don't use that name?
Well, they're in completely unrelated classes.
I know, but could they? that they owned
no,
up?
because consumers won't get confused. The standard
That
is,
would
will
be
a
the
consumer?
backup.
Yeah,
Okay.
the
defense
standard
would
is
be,
the standard is a consumer going to get confused, and most likely not between chocolate and soap.
Let's hope not. Because those would be bad substitutes for each other.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that you are supportive of your clients working with the right professionals. Tell us about that. So CPAs, lawyers, advisors, financial advisors. So do you help coordinate that, orchestrate that, or just promote it? What's your position on that?
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to is when people are starting businesses, as you know, we get it. It's really confusing. You don't know what to get started on. But there's things you have to do in the business that if you mess up, there's not as big of a deal. So for example, if you're putting together a website and you don't end up liking it, you're not going to get in trouble by the government. It doesn't really matter. You just fix it. But there are things, there's business, you don't want to get in trouble with the IRS and you don't want to get in trouble with the law. So we always tell people when you're starting a business, you want to make sure that you're working with the right attorneys, because if you get in trouble with the law, that's just going to cost you so much. And then with a CPA, because you also don't want to get in trouble with the IRS. And then of course, if you're making, a certain amount, it would be great to work with a financial advisor or planner, because if you're new to money, then it's really hard to know how to manage that.
Sure.
So that's really helpful. Whereas the rest of the stuff, although it's important, it's a little bit more ancillary, because there's no governing body that you're going to get in trouble with, or it's not going to cost you tens and thousands.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the team approach. That's how we work with our clients, attorney, CPA. Attorneys could be, depending on the situation, estate attorney, family attorney, business contract attorney. So there could be a whole team.
Yeah.
All right. Mindset shifts that successful business owners should embody.
Yeah,
That's deep. You guys are getting deep and philosophical here. Doesn't sound legal.
We've learned so much.
We've learned. I mean, there's stuff we also, you're just relearning everything. But I know, because all of our clients are business owners, and sometimes when we're having a client call, we're not just advising on trademarks. Sometimes you're talking with them, and we're all in the same, boat where we have businesses. And for someone who's just starting, sometimes we realize on the call we're kind of not coaching in the sense that we're their coach, but sometimes we're like giving them feedback, like, don't worry about failing, for example. That's one thing that people, when they come to us, they're like, we want to make sure we're doing it right. Of course, with legal and all of like the IRS, you want to make sure you get it right. But with everything else, there's no concept. I would say there isn't a concept of failing. Know that there are things you're going to get right and things that you aren't going to get right. So be okay going into business knowing that everything is just like a chance, and either you're going to get it right or you're not, or it's going to be right for part of the time, and then at some point it might not be working and you might have to shift.
What's so interesting about that, the last show that I did was about uncertainty. And specifically how it applies to behavioral finance and investing. But a book that I had read recently is called The Uncertainty Principle, and it talks about the known spectrum. So it's known, not yet known, and then never known, right? So the known would be like, George Washington was the first president. And the unknown would be, I don't know the word gray in Norwegian, but I can find out. Mm-hmm. And then the not possible to know is, I don't know who the president's going to be in, 2054. So just, understanding that and having appreciation that, like, hey, there's certain things that I can either find out, certain things I know, and some things, to your point, you got to take a risk. And I think that's what diversification is about, right? So you have some things that are known and that's a very low risk. But if we continue to play always just in the known, how much fun is life? Would you start a business? Well, I don't know how it's going to end. I can't start a business. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like taking a little risk. No, a educated risk, right? Don't just throw hazard to the wind. But anyway, I think there's an interesting overlap there.
Yeah. That's actually really, I want to look into that book now.
Yeah.
Because so much of it too, I mean, even for us, there's so many times where we're like, is this the right move or is it not? But you don't know until you don't know what you don't know, and you have to take a risk. And so even when we started our firm, there was like courses we took, there were mentors we had. And so sometimes we did that educated risk thing. We did what other people were doing. And sometimes it just didn't work for us. And it's not that we were doing anything wrong. It just wasn't what we were supposed to do. And I think that's nice because then you make, you said like, what would make it great if everyone's kind of doing the same thing? So sometimes when you deviate a little bit, it's what makes things great, you know? People need that.
Starting a business, starting a relationship, starting a partnership, all that stuff is a risk, right?
Yeah.
You guys going from litigating to transactional, that was a risk, right?
Yeah.
'Cause you started in one direction.
Yeah. And another thing that people see as a risk is like spending money. And we learned that in order to make money, you really do have to spend. You have to move around money to make even like a lot of things that we invested in the beginning when we started our business. We were like, oh, this is, it's a lot of money, but we were able to, when we invested in these, other professionals, it always ended up being more often than not a good decision. It helped us.
The concept of using money as a tool.
Right.
And I think especially, and I understand that part of this does come with privilege. If you're someone who was raised with a lot more money, I think that may be an easier mindset to have. If you're someone who struggled a bit with more, I can completely understand why, you know, when you're making a little bit more, you're like, let me save it. But really, I think one thing that we've really worked on is using money as a tool and then how to use it as a tool correctly. Because, of course, there's educated guesses and then there's not so educated guesses, but also something that might be aligned for us as a tool might not be for another business. So if we feel like if it's something that could help us, then we just go for it and then see what happens. And sometimes, most of the time, it really does work out. And if it doesn't, you kind of just, shift around and try to do better next time. Yeah,
great. All right, a little behind the scenes. What do you guys like to do for fun? I know volleyball and travel.
Yeah.
Okay. And Carmel, travel also.
Travel, of course.
Yeah.
I also love, I love to play tennis. I love being out. I love being by the ocean and getting into the water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did you guys go to Moorea together, or was that separate?
We did, and we really want to go back because we both love being in the water. It's just
There's
so
no better
soothing.
place than the water.
And in Moorea you can swim with the whales. So that's what we did. I think when we were there every single day, we got on the boat. They took us out there to go, hop in the water, and they take you to the middle of the ocean, whatever, and they're just like, okay, you wait, and then you swim a mile, and then you hope that the humpback whales are there, and it's like. I don't know.
Magical.
It's one of the, it's
Pretty
magical.
great, right?
Did you get to do it?
We did, yeah. We caught it this last season.
Oh, nice.
Because it's a seasonal, right?
Yeah,
a couple of months a year.
Yeah.
It's like August to November or something.
Yeah. Maybe November, August to October for sure. Yeah. And then the sharks and the rays, did you swim with them?
Yeah, we did that. That was
freak
really
you out
cool.
at all, or?
Well,
at first, for a minute?
When we saw how comfortable everyone was, we were like, oh, these are safe then.
Yeah. If I was
safe.
in the water by myself and I saw that, I would freak out. But because there's like, you're all in there together, and then there's like free divers next to you, and you're like, oh, you're fine. Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. We're getting close to the end, so I have the opportunity to ask you my favorite question, which is, what is your ultimate lesson learned in your experience as an attorney?
What's the ultimate lesson I've learned as an attorney?
Yeah.
I think one thing that I've learned or am learning is that you can pave your own way. And I think especially as female attorneys and being litigators, there was just a way that you were told to do law, especially it's a very masculine field. I know it's male dominated, but also you are in your masculine. It's very litigious. It's contentious. You're always fighting. And those are just not principles that I lead with from day to day. And it's very weird to say that you have a law firm where you're just happy all the time and you're just having fun and being yourself. It's not the norm. But that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to do things differently, and it's proved to work well for us. So I've learned that if you want to do something your way, you can obviously understand like the social aspects of it. I'm not going to go into a courtroom and, act like the way that I would maybe outside a courtroom. But if you want to be a certain way, you can do it. I think the world is craving people to do things differently. So
that's a great response. Carmel, anything different for you?
Yeah, I think one thing I learned is that everything just works out in the end. Really, because when you're when you're in law school, for example, you are in a bubble and you're told you have to take these classes to be successful. You're told you have to pass the bar on the first try. You're told all of these things, and you're told you have to be top of your class and all the things that you really believe in and feed into. But then when you step into the real world, you realize, okay, these people who are the top of the class now, and the people who are bottom of their class, it's like it doesn't really at the end it's just when you're in that bubble you think it's everything, but then when you step out of that bubble you realize like everyone had their own path and everyone just made it work for them. And people changed their paths, people did different things, people who were top of their class are not even doing law anymore, and it's like now we see this 8 years out and we're like, oh, wow, like we would have never thought that so-and-so would be doing that, or like so-and-so would be doing this now. And it's just completely like not at all what you would think when you're in it. But then when you're out, you just realize everyone figures it out and does what makes them, that works for them in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a takeoff on that, and this is one of my really just, many years of, you hope you get wisdom, right, over time. And it's a very simple cliche, but things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really pick a thing, this is something I really wanted to buy, like this home I really wanted to buy, and whatever reason it doesn't work out. Well, at the end, there was reasons that it didn't, or a partnership. I've had failed partnership in my career, and it was the best thing that ever happened. I didn't understand it at the time, but it ended up being the best thing. If it wouldn't have been for that, I wouldn't be here in this office where we are today.
Yeah, it's great to be able to look at it that way.
Yeah, it's hard at the time.
Yeah.
You don't really like, I don't know what lesson I'm supposed to learn here, but maybe there's something.
Right.
Anyway. Well, ladies, thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for coming in. It's been really great.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Oh, of course. And thank you for all who have tuned in, and we look forward to being back in studio next week. Cheers.
Tune in next week for the latest edition of the Zandbergen Report, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Catch up on our recent shows by visiting podcast.bartzandbergen.com. The Zandbergen Report is also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio and Spotify. Interested in being a featured guest on our show or have a question you'd like to hear us answer? Email podcast@bartzandbergen.com. The contents of this podcast episode do not constitute an offer of securities or a solicitation of an offer to buy securities and may not be relied upon in making an investment decision related to any investment offering Axxcess Wealth Management LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Axxcess does not warrant the accuracy or completeness of the information contained herein. Opinions are our current opinions and are subject to change without notice. Prices, quotes, rates are subject to change without notice. Generally, investments are not FDIC insured, not bank guaranteed, and may lose value.